He finally had time to rest. So why did rest still feel like work?
Yeah, that is, it's basically the defining emotional contradiction of our modern era.
Right. So picture this. It's Friday evening. The laptop is finally closed with that, deeply satisfying little click. The room is perfectly calm.
The shadows are getting long.
Exactly. The phone is completely quiet, just sitting face down on the coffee table. You sink into the couch to finally truly rest. You've been looking forward to this exact moment all week long.
But instead of peace, your body and your mind completely rebel.
Yes. Your heart rate doesn't drop. There's this persistent tightness in your chest. And almost against your own will, your hand just sort of starts reaching for that quiet phone to check messages.
You start replaying some vaguely awkward conversation from Tuesday afternoon in your head.
Right, the Tuesday meeting replay. And quietly, underneath it all, you start wondering whether you have actually truly earned this break.
Because the physical environment in your living room literally screams safety. But the internal environment is it's sounding a 5-alarm fire. The silence itself actually becomes the stressor.
So tonight, our mission is to figure out why the modern nervous system actively rejects the very peace it craves. We're going to look at the philosophy of burnout, the strange psychology of our inner monologues, and why the simple act of doing nothing somehow threatens our very identity.
It's a massive topic.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why does the pressure feel so deeply personal? I don't just feel physically tense on the couch. I feel actively guilty.
Well, because the nature of the pressure we face has fundamentally shifted over the last few decades. There's this fascinating philosophical concept known as the Achievement Society.
Oh, right. From the cultural theorists studying burnout.
Yes. If you look back at the 20th century, we lived in what you'd call a disciplinary society. You had an external boss, a factory whistle, a time card.
The authority stood completely outside of you.
Exactly, forcing you to work. The walls of the factory were clear boundaries. But today, those walls have vanished. The pressure didn't disappear, it just moved inside.
We've become our own managers.
The ultimate imperative today isn't obedience to a master anymore. It's the endless optimization of the self.
Wait, but having autonomy over our own lives is generally considered a massive improvement. I would way rather manage myself than be yelled at by a foreman on an assembly line.
Are you saying that self-direction is actually the trap?
What's fascinating here is that this self-exploitation actually feels like freedom.
Oh, wow.
Because we are the ones driving ourselves, because we're constantly saying, I want to do this, I can achieve this, I want to optimize my morning routine. We don't recognize it as a form of violence against ourselves.
The modern mantra is, yes, we can.
Right. But that limitless positivity, that endless, frictionless pursuit of achievement eventually forces the ego to overheat.
The soul becomes utterly burnt out?
Because it simply cannot escape its own internal taskmaster. You are both the warden and the prisoner.
And you can quit a toxic job, but you can't quit your own brain.
No, you can't. Which brings us right back to the couch. If the boss has taken a permanent residence inside our head, what exactly is that boss saying? Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about how absurd this actual experience is. We sit down, we actively, consciously decide to rest, and instead of quiet, we get an unsolicited, nonstop inner monologue narrating everything we did wrong that day.
It's an incredibly loud roommate.
It's like having a roommate who completely refuses to read the room. You just want to relax, and this roommate is pacing back and forth, holding a clipboard, loudly critiquing the way you worded an email 3 hours ago.
And then pivoting to remind you that you haven't been to the dentist in a year.
Yes, but we have to ask why we tolerate this voice, right? Why it gets louder in the silence.
Well, we essentially use this inner chatter to constantly recreate the outside world inside our heads.
What do you mean by that?
Unmediated reality. Just sitting in a quiet room, simply existing, it feels far too vast, too open, and too unpredictable. We use that neurotic inner chatter to buffer ourselves from the raw, unfiltered experience of life, just to maintain a semblance of control.
So we are creating our own noise to block out the silence? That sounds exhausting.
It really is. The inner voice acts very much like a whistling tea kettle. Throughout the week, you build up this massive reservoir of nervous, desire-based, or fear-based energy.
Okay, I'm following.
When you are active, you can channel that energy outward into your work, your errands, your conversations. You don't notice the pressure because it's actively driving you forward.
But when you sit in silence, those external outlets are completely gone.
The energy has nowhere to go. So the mental voice becomes the release valve. When we sit on the couch, we aren't generating new stress. We are finally forced to hear the neurosis of our inner roommate blowing off steam.
The tea kettle was always boiling. We were just too busy running around the kitchen to hear the whistle.
Precisely.
But let me stop you there because I think there's a missing piece to this puzzle.
Go on.
If it's just pent-up energy blowing off steam, eventually the kettle should empty out, right? After an hour on the couch,
Or an overactive default mode network. Maybe the root of it goes much deeper into our fundamental sense of self.
our identity.
Consider the possibility that a person has built their entire identity around being needed, being productive, and constantly solving complex problems.
Wow. So if nobody needs them in that specific moment on the couch, they don't feel free, they feel unnecessary.
Exactly.
Oh, that hits a little too close to home. It's not that we don't know how to rest, it's that the very act of resting threatens who we think we are.
It's terrifying.
This brings in a whole new relationship layer, specifically our relationship with ourselves. Let's look at this through the lens of early psychological conditioning.
The domestication process.
Right. From childhood, we are basically domesticated by a system of reward and punishment. Think about how we raise children in this culture. You're praised when you do your chores, when you bring home the good grades.
When you perform well in the field.
Yes. You get the ultimate reward, affection, and approval. But if you are idle or lazy, you are punished, criticized, or ignored.
The underlying lesson of that domestication is devastating. We learn that our worth is tied entirely to our output.
Yes. We learn very early on to project this false image of perfect productivity and constant utility just to ensure we are accepted by our tribe.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, philosophers of love and psychology often frame this as a choice between two tracks, the track of fear and the track of love.
Tell me more about that.
On the track of fear, everything in your life is conditional. You only value yourself if you finish the project, if you answer all the emails before zero inbox.
If you perfectly fit the image of the successful, busy, indispensable person.
Exactly. Rest is physically and psychologically impossible here because the moment you stop producing, you are violating the conditions of your own self-worth. You're constantly judging yourself for not being perfectly productive.
Wait, calling it the track of fear sounds, I don't know, a bit melodramatic. When I'm sitting on the couch feeling bad about not doing laundry, I don't feel afraid. I just feel a sense of heavy responsibility. Are you saying that this sense of responsibility is actually just a mask for fear?
Absolutely. It is the fear of being unlovable or unworthy. On the track of love, by contrast, the relationship with the self is unconditional.
It isn't based on your usefulness.
Or your performance, or your ability to constantly prove your value to exist. True rest requires shifting to this unconditional track. But because we've spent decades on the track of fear, stopping the performance feels incredibly dangerous.
To rest is to drop the mask.
And if our entire identity is wrapped up in being the capable one who gets things done, dropping that mask feels like a kind of psychological death. We literally feel like we will disappear if we aren't doing something.
Let's map out exactly how this trap works in real time. Right. Step one, it starts with pressure. That internal manager we talked about, demanding optimization and output.
And step two, that pressure naturally leads to exhaustion. Your sympathetic nervous system is fried, your body and mind are completely depleted.
So step three, the exhaustion forces you to attempt rest. You sit down, close the laptop, put your feet up, but instantly we hit step four, that attempt at rest triggers guilt.
That childhood conditioning flares up.
Right, reminding you that you aren't being useful or productive, so you are currently unworthy. Step five, that guilt feels deeply physically uncomfortable. So to escape the feeling of guilt, you start scanning.
We've all done this. It's a Saturday afternoon, you're supposed to be relaxing, and suddenly you find yourself opening LinkedIn on your phone just to feel a pulse of professional validation.
You actively look for a problem to solve, a message to check, anything to prove you are still needed. And step six, what does that scanning do? It spikes your cortisol again, bringing you right back to even more exhaustion.
Pressure, exhaustion, rest, guilt, scanning, exhaustion. It is a perpetual motion machine of modern anxiety. And notice the cruelest irony of this loop.
What's that?
Rest, which is supposed to be the biological and psychological cure for exhaustion, actually becomes a trigger for more of it. Because the rest is never pure. It's entirely contaminated by the guilt of non-production.
You are spending energy, beating yourself up for not spending energy.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? We've talked about the nervous system.
Very uncomfortable space.
Yeah. If a person only feels valuable when they are actively useful, what happens when life finally becomes completely quiet? Let's say you actually manage to put the phone in another room and sit through the guilt. What is waiting for us in that silence?
Well, this is why deep contemplative rest feels so terrifying today. We aren't just talking about sleeping for 8 hours to recover your muscles for another day of work. We are talking about profound boredom.
Boredom.
Yeah, we're talking about the traditional concept of the Sabbath. Historically, the Sabbath wasn't just a day off. It was a radical day dedicated purely to not to.
Not to.
A day intentionally free of all in order to activities. You didn't do something in order to get a result. You just existed.
But when the modern mind faces that kind of pure, unadulterated time without the noise of our external roles, we don't feel relief.
No, we face a deep existential inner panic. Because without the emails, the demands, the crises, the problems to solve.
Who were we?
Exactly. We realize that we haven't just been tolerating our problems and our frantic productivity. We have been actively clinging to them just to define who we are.
We hold on to our stress like a life raft, because without it, we are totally untethered in the middle of an ocean. The quiet room isn't peaceful, it's a mirror. And it's showing us that we don't know how to exist just for the sake of existing.
We've forgotten how to just be. We only know how to do.
And that realization is haunting. It means the restlessness on the couch isn't just a failure to relax, and it isn't just a biological glitch of cortisol. It is a confrontation with the void.
When the external world stops making demands of you, you are left entirely alone with yourself. And if you have only ever known yourself as a tool for achieving tasks, that self is completely lost in the absence of a task.
The tragedy of the modern condition is that we have become excellent instruments, but very poor human beings.
That's beautifully said.
You sit there in the fading light of the living room. The phone is finally dark on the table beside you. The house is completely still. The rush of the week is over. You are perfectly safe, perfectly alone, and perfectly free. But your chest is tight, and your fingers are twitching, waiting for a crisis to solve. What if rest does not feel empty because something is missing, but because the emergency finally stopped giving you a role?